Welcome to the Data Strategy Show. My name's Samir Sharma and I'll be your host for the next 60 minutes. My guest today on the show is John Thompson. John is an international technology executive with over 30 years of experience in the business intelligence and advanced analytics fields. Currently, John is responsible for the global advanced analytics and artificial intelligence team and efforts at CSL. Prior to CSL, John was an executive partner at Gartner, where he was a consultant to market-leading companies in the areas of digital transformation, data monetization, and advanced analytics. And before Gartner, John was responsible for the advanced analytics business unit of the Dell Software Group. In 2017, John co-authored his first book, How to Win with Intelligence, which debuted as the #1 new book in analytics. It's a book that guides non-technical executives through the journey of creating an analytics function, funding initiatives, and driving change in business operations through data and applied analytical applications. In June 2020, he celebrated his latest book, Building Analytics Teams, Leveraging Analytics and Artificial Intelligence for Business Improvement. One of John's primary areas of focus and interest has been to create innovative technologies to increase the value derived by organizations around the world. John has built startup organizations from the ground up, and he has re-engineered business units of Fortune 500 firms to reach their potential. I hope you really enjoy this episode. We've got some great insights from John. Please do like, share, and leave your comments. Thank you very much. John Thompson, welcome to the Data Strategy Show. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show today. Listen, John, you're the Global Head of Advanced Analytics and AI at CSL Behring. Just tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, thanks for having me, Samir. It's been very exciting to talk to you and get this lined up and be on the show. I know you've had many other thought leaders on the podcast, the program, and I'm happy to be part of your cadre of experts.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you. I've been in the advanced analytics and artificial intelligence space for many years. I started out 37 years ago.
Wow.
I had a revelation when I came out of college that data and analytics were going to be the future, and it just took a couple decades longer than I thought it would take. But I've been consistent in my focus that I've always believed that the world was going to come around to the understanding that it all comes down to data and analytics, and I've stuck with it. So I've worked across 20 different industries and have helped implement 60 different advanced analytic applications. And wow. I love it. It's just a great journey and a wonderful career so far.
Yeah. And you've written 2 books as well. One around sort of an executive type education. Well, I think both of them probably are pitched in the same way in terms of getting executives to understand how to mobilize this thing called advanced analytics, or, at that time the AI wasn't featuring, but then now, your latest book is Building Analytics Teams. Tell us a little bit why, I can understand the first book and the education piece. What made you arrive at the opinion that, I got to write this other book because I'm now seeing a whole new, challenge out there within industries and companies?
Yeah, as you said, the first book was really for C-level, non-technical C-level executives, because at the time I was flying, it was about 5 years ago, I was flying all over the world for Dell, and I would sit down with CEOs, CFOs, COOs, and I'd start talking about advanced analytics and data, and you could see that they were reticent. They had some real apprehension about what was going to happen.
That was that sort of deer in headlights moment, was it?
Yeah. What McKinsey and Bain and Deloitte were telling them. So I thought, I'll write that book. And that book did well.
Yeah.
And then in the intervening 3 years, I really started hearing in the press and from different pundits that, AI isn't being successful and advanced analytics isn't driving change, and it isn't doing this, it isn't doing that. And it really came down to one of the big problems that I recognize is that the teams weren't being funded right. They weren't being built well. They weren't being managed correctly. The projects weren't focused in the right areas. They were selecting the wrong projects. So I thought, I'm just going to write a how-to book, pretty substantial book on how do you actually start an advanced analytics function, and how do you make it a high performing function that can actually drive change in it? So I just saw a need in the marketplace. So that's why I wrote the book.
That's awesome. Listen, we'll come to the book in a second, but I have to ask you this. You just stated when you left university, you had an epiphany, a revelation, whatever that might be. What was that? Because that was, okay, I'm going to say it was 37 years ago, whenever that was, and how did you foresee, what was that moment that led you to that, thought process of saying, do you know what, data analytics is the place to be?
Yeah, it was one of those things that, I was asked to write all sorts of systems, and I was writing in assembler and, the old languages,
yeah,
all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And in about 3 years of doing that, I just recognized that everything that I was driving for and everything I was doing, number one, was based on data. And number two was trying to drive better insights and decisions in the business. That's all it really was. That was the core of everything that we were doing. Now, of course, the systems were more low level. They were transactional and all that kind of stuff.
Of course.
But whenever I was brought into a management level meeting, it was always, what can we do here? How can we fix this? Well, how can we get better insight? Where's the data? And I just thought, well, if that's really where we're at, we've got a long way to go to bring data together, to clean it up, to use it, and turn it into something that, a CEO or a VP or an SVP or a director can actually use. So I thought, this will all be done in 5 to 6, 7, 8, 9 years. We'll have it all licked and it'll be finished. And, 30 plus years later, we're still working on it.
So let me ask you this then. What are the sort of the barriers or the challenges you've seen over that 30-year period? As you just said, we've, however many years later, we've come to the same types of, things and analyst firms saying projects are failing and blah, blah, blah. What still are the challenges, that companies are facing in today's situation with data and analytics, I should say?
Yeah, we've consistently moved the frontier forward. There's no doubt about it. When I started, there was no even concept of business intelligence, data warehousing, management, decision support. None of that stuff existed. So we have made great progress. I don't want people to think that we're still working on the same, problems we were way back in
no.
I think the early 80s.
Yes.
So we've made progress, but we still are challenged. The technology is not there yet. We're still, we've done spreadsheets, we've done databases, we've done BI and dashboards. That's all done and dusted. We've moved on now. We're into advanced analytics, statistics, mathematics, artificial intelligence. I mean, this week alone, I've seen multiple announcements on the advancements of advanced analytics. I mean, we're still kind of tight in machine learning and neural networks. We're still kind of hanging around that center of gravity. We saw something about liquid networks that are starting to learn. We're starting to move away from the train and then run paradigm.
And then learn.
We're moving into a continuous learning paradigm. We've seen huge benefits and advances over the last 2 years on explainable AI.
Where
we're starting to bring together multiple mathematical concepts so we can have insight into what models are actually doing. Those things are really moving forward, and we see great progress. So, this morning we saw some people talking on LinkedIn about artificial general intelligence. Believe me, we're nowhere near that.
No, we're not.
we're my date for AGI is 2250. So you don't worry about it. Your kids don't worry about it. Maybe their kids or their kids have.
We'll worry about it.
We have a long way to go.
Yeah.
But we still are running into the same cultural barriers. You run into it every day in your work. I sit down with the executives and I have conversations with them about what we can do. And most of the time, it's pretty clear they can't tell if I'm talking about magic or data science because they don't understand it. So we as data science leaders really need to be working. Most of my job is talking to people about, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But you need to realize as an owner, SVP, EVP, C-level executive, the owner of the supply chain, the manufacturing operations, pricing, customer facing, sales and marketing, you need to understand that when we do this project, the 6 months, 9 months, a year that it's going to take, when we come back with the insights, you're going to have to change the processes you operate. You're going to have to change how the manufacturing line runs. You're going to have to change how the supply chain operates. You're going to have to change pricing. And that all touches almost every function of the business. So you're going to have to retrain people. You're going to have to upskill them. You're going to have to do all this. So what I see, the real problem that we're still having is the organizations are too rigid. They're not ready to be nimble enough to take advantage of the insights and the insights and the changes that we're showing them that need to be undertaken.
So that rigidity, that organizational immaturity, I guess, is what we're talking about, and the fact that they are still, I'm not eons away, but years away from really getting benefit and value creation from this thing called advanced analytics or AI. How do you, as an analytics leader, then have the conversations with those people that bring them to that thought process of saying, now I know why we need it? If that's missing, then what is that process that you go by to fundamentally shift that mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question, Samir. And the way I generally do it is that I'm always reading, we've cited, things I've been reading this morning and things I'm writing all the time. And, so McKinsey is a great source for research in this area. The AI group is always talking about what's going on in the marketplace. They have their annual AI survey, and I really like their research. And of course, there's many other people talking about it, but McKinsey has shown in their research that the leading firms have already invested in AI, have already seen the benefit from it, are changing their processes, and are getting better and are making more money. If you bring it up to the highest level possible, they're more profitable.
Absolutely.
Because they have AI teams that they're using and they're changing the way they do business. Now, when you move back into the early majority firms in any industry, they're kind of using AI, but they're not all in yet. So the leaders are actually moving away from the early majority. Then when you move into the late majority, they're skeptical of AI. And then when you get to the laggards, they don't believe it all. So the way I explain it is that where do you think this firm is? Where do you think our company is? Do you want to be a leader in the industry and moving away? Or do you want to be losing ground and staying where we are today? Generally, that conversation is all you need to really have.
And that's a pretty powerful conversation to have if you're sitting in front of a CEO or the C-suite, right? I mean, that's going to hit them right where it hurts, because there's no other response to that, is there?
Yeah, it's like, okay, do you want to
do you want to make money or not?
Do you want to make money or not? And usually the answer is, okay, how much is this going to take? How long is it going to take? How many people do you need? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So. And I guess there's where lots of those companies are, they're not even, and I would probably say it from my experience, they're not even really at that AI focus. A lot of people are still embedded in this whole BI or self-service or whatever it might be, which quite frankly is so kind of out of date. And I think that's caused a lot of the cultural, issues that we're currently sort of, experiencing. So, okay, I'm a leader. I'm thinking about it now, and I'm saying, right, we've got to go full force with this thing called data and analytics. Yes, we've got pockets of things lying around in the organization. But I need to hire an advanced analytics team, right? What's the DNA of that team?
That's a great question. And if anybody's read my book, they know that I have very strong views on this, or if you've heard me speak before. You need to start out with hiring a leader, someone who's going to run that team, and someone who understands that advanced analytics, data science, data engineers, those kind of people are not IT professionals. They are not your bog standard developers. They're very creative. They're very interested in math and science and data, and they're very engaged in their work. So you need to hire a group of people that don't look like anybody else in the organization, and that is an opportunity and a problem at the same time. because those folks, they're very creative, they're very smart, they're also very expensive. I talk about the two different structures in a data science team. There's the artisanal team, where you hire people who are artisans who do everything from problem statement, project charter, data acquisition, data integration, feature engineering, model building, subject matter expert, relationship engagement, executive engagement. They do it all. Or you can hire a team that's more like a modular team. I have people that do data engineering. I have people who do feature engineering.
Right. Okay.
Modeling.
Yeah.
And then people are like, oh, well, one sounds more expensive than the other. And the fact is they're pretty much the same cost. In an artisanal team, you'll end up with maybe 10 or 15 people. On a modular team, you'll end up with 30. But the pay discrepancy is such that they cost the same.
Same. And that was one of my questions. So I've just rubbed it out now. I've written down. I mean, you got there already. So, this whole artisanal and modular, the thing for me is, and most of the time we see what you've just described there as a data scientist who can do that artisanal. And I would say that's the end-to-end piece. That's the engagement. That's the stakeholder management. That's really understanding the business and the way it operates, and understanding the challenges, and getting down to even sitting with a BA maybe and understanding business processes, because what do we need to break? What is working well? What's not? And then the whole gamut. Isn't that a bit of a isn't that the bit which people think a data scientist can do everything? And they are this magician.
Some are and can, but there's very few of those people. They're hard to find. And they're getting more and more expensive. We pay well at CSL and the data science team. And I just had a conversation with one of my employees yesterday that said, hey, I'm not looking around, but I'm getting feedback from my peers that, I'm not keeping up with the Kardashians. And it was like, okay, cool. I'm glad you're telling me, so the market is continually rewarding these people with higher and higher compensation. So they're looking for environments where they're respected, they're engaged, they're given challenging work, and they're let alone to do the good work that they can do. I had a conversation, this is kind of tangential to what we're talking about, but I think it's illustrative that, about 2 years ago, some people came to me and said, hey, you've got the advanced analytics and the AI team. We're going to give you the RPA stuff too, the robotic process automation. And I said, well, cool. Let's have a conversation about that. I'm open to doing more and having more in my team. I said, we're going to have to hire some people to do RPA work. And they're like, no, your data scientists will do it. And I said, you know what? I said, we can give it to them and they will all quit. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I said, RPA is more like BI and business analyst work. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of work. But data scientists don't show up to click buttons on a user interface to do process work. They want to look at data. They want to discern new patterns. They want to discover. They want to have impact on the business at a strategic level. We generally don't talk about that in the data science team because strategery is not something data scientists really care about. What they really care about is impact. They want to do something that's going to make a difference.
And that could be, but I mean, from a business perspective, they're still saying, what is the business challenge? What is it that I'm, trying to solve, break down?
Very articulately put there. Now, one thing that we do need to make sure that people don't walk away, being a little bit misinformed in our conversation here is that, artisanal data scientist teams is where I generally start. I like to start there. I like to work with those people. They don't do things in a vacuum. When we do projects, we have BAs, we call them subject matter experts that are tied at the hip with the data scientists, because we know math, we know data, we know what we can do. But, business processes and all these different phenomena or operations are different in most businesses. There's idiosyncrasies and things that need to be accounted for that the subject matter experts know. So when you put those two together, then you can have a winning project.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that sentiment completely. I'm often intrigued by the number of, let's say, but by how busy the C-suite is. The C-suite has got, this week there's a new arrival, next week there'll be another new arrival, in a couple of weeks there'll be another new job, or what, another new technology that will make out that there'll be a new C-suite position. I'm going to quote something that you said, and I'll ask you the question. You said, organizations can sow the seeds of failure from the very beginning of an endeavor and never know it until it's too late. So where do advanced analytics and AI, or, let's just call it that advanced analytics piece, where does it sit in the organization?
It's a good question. I've been very vocal about this as well, that I believe that it needs to be as high in the organization as possible for all the reasons that we've talked about. It should report to the CEO or the COO. That's the only two places, in my opinion, where it should report.
Okay.
Now, I've had conversations with people who do report into CIOs, and they've berated me for my position that they work for a CIO who's visionary and intelligent and forward-looking and is a wonderful person and helps them develop their career and gets budgets and all that other kind of stuff.
Sure.
And I take that.
And there are some. Yeah.
And there are some.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm talking on broad brushstrokes here. If you want your data science team to be as impactful as possible, who else in the organization between those two roles, besides those two roles, can go to a line of business executive and say, once this project is done, you are going to re-engineer your processes to make sure that you are taking advantage of the insights delivered, from this project. Nobody. Yeah. You can't have the CFO go over to the head of up manufacturing and do that. You can't have the CIO go tell the CMO to do it. That doesn't work. They're peers. So if you really want the change management to happen and you really want to be serious about it, then it needs to be the CEO or the COO.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's often a very perhaps contentious issue because we've now got positions like the as you know, the chief data officer, the chief analytics officer, or the chief AI officer, the chief data and information officer. I mean, there's so many titles. So I think for me, something like that is absolutely should be driven from the top and have enough impetus to ensure that we can break down those barriers between, and I think it's the word that you used, change management, because that's essentially what this team is driving at, right? So on that note, then, how do you start to embed into analytics teams, into advanced analytics teams? How do you start to embed that sense of change management? What frameworks or what kind of processes do you ask them to consider or train in?
Well, it all starts with the data science leadership. There's no doubt about it. I tell my data scientists that you work on the projects. I'll deal with the change management function part of it. Because data scientists, even very good artisanal data scientists, they have to be really good at communication. They have to be good at presentations. They have to be great modelers. Yeah. They have to understand data integration. They have a lot on their plate. Yeah. So while I expect them to be able to present to SVPs, EVPs, and C-level executives, I don't expect them to go toe-to-toe to fight with those executives to get approval for things to get done.
Of course.
So my job as an analytics leader, and the job of all of us as analytics leaders, is to have those discussions with people before we start the projects.
Sure.
And convince them that there is going to be the value in the change management there. I generally don't say this, and I'm reticent to actually say it, but I think it's something that needs to be said, is that the data science or the AI function, whatever you want to call it, is really the driver of all digital transformation. If you really want to understand how to transform an area, do the analytics first. Then you can come back and say, okay, our customer acquisition function doesn't work as well as it could, and it can be better if we do this, or our supply chain operation is inefficient in these areas and we should change it. So I'm a big believer that the work that we do is the tip of the spear in digital transformation.
Okay.
we inform the re-engineering of the processes, we reinform the process intelligence, and we allow people to lay down the new roads that are more efficient than the past roads. So, I try not to conflate those two together, because digital transformation is another big bugbear that you don't want to really dive into that.
Absolutely. I agree.
But advanced analytics really is, an AI, I think, is the leading edge of all that.
So when you start, so say let's take a particular project or something like that at CSL Bearing. You've hired in a bunch of data scientists. You've got this artisanal team, and how do you start to engage with the business and start to say, well, guys, we've got this team now. They're here. We've got the credibility. We've got the people with the knowledge. They understand what they're doing. How do you start to build that prioritization with the business and pick off what's the right thing to do?
Right.
Is it a proof of concept? Is it, how do you determine that at CSL?
It's a great question. This example is obviously pre-COVID, so you can bend it for post-COVID. But I had 600 meetings in the first 9 months. So I counted.
Oh my goodness.
I met with everybody from the C-suite down to people who worked on the manufacturing floor, and I was in Australia and Europe and all over the world meeting with people. And that it sounds more challenging than it is. Sometimes people in analytics are like, oh, I don't, I'm going to have to create something to do. No, you don't.
No.
All businesses have more strategic challenges than they can undertake.
Yes.
So get high enough in the organization and find out what people say. And it could be as something as our pricing is wrong. Okay. That's the tip of the iceberg. And then, just start drilling down on it. Over the last 2 years, we did a complete and detailed analysis of our donor pricing model, and we completely revamped it. I think it's the first time in decades that's ever happened. Yeah. And we've built a model. I can't say much more about it than that, but it is really, putting our competitors in a spot. They can't quite understand it. They haven't figured out what we've done, and they probably won't be able to figure out what we've done because it's really complex and difficult to understand. It took us almost a year to get it right, but we've done it, and that was a real, a very impactful strategic change, driven by one of our data scientists. Yeah. So get up high enough in the organization, listen to what they have to say. You'll probably get 3 or 4 strategic challenges out of one half-hour conversation with a C-level executive, and then you've probably got enough work for a year right there.
Yeah, and just by you saying that the strategic challenges, that's the one thing that I don't see people doing a lot of. I see them sort of, as you said, making it up. What do we do now? Oh, I've always done it this way, so we're gonna continue to build on. Let's just go and fix a problem because I'm very good at marketing, or I'm very good at something that's typical of a new project team. So in that sense, the strategic challenges are those objectives that the business is trying to achieve. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're trying to acquire more customers. We're trying to, have better margin. We're trying to, acquire the best possible, smaller firm in the marketplace.
Yeah.
All great opportunities for analytics.
Correct. So you can start to model that behavior. You can start to understand the pinch points in that process. You can really start to understand where you're going to get the value creation across that whole value chain of data and business process and so on. Is there a particular framework that you offer data scientists to work within, or is it the typical crisp DM or that you're working through? What's the way that you ask your data scientists to work through?
Yeah, I've seen crisp DM, and I know a lot of people that use it, and it's a great process. I remember contributing to it when it was originally written. We generally do a pretty standard process methodology. We sit down, we understand, the project charter. We write up what we call project charters. And
the data scientist does, or do you do that?
The data scientists do that, because they have to be bought in. It's their project, their timeline. They're doing the work. So, I review it, and the subject matter experts review it, and then we take it to the line of business, and they approve it, and then off we go. So it's pretty standard, understand the problem, acquire the data. Then it gets a little bit, squishy in the middle, because, as data scientists, we want to try, new and interesting things. We want to integrate different kinds of data. And sometimes we go down paths and we fail. So, that's where the difference comes in around a data science versus just a straight up development project.
Yeah.
In developing a database and developing a dashboard, putting in an ERP system or a CRM system, you start at this date and you end at that date.
Yeah.
And there's some deviation in there, but
it's
not
pretty
much.
much the same. Yeah.
Pretty much the same.
Yeah.
You add more people, you take people out, it goes faster, it goes slower. With data science, you get in the middle there and you're like, I think I'll try a clustering technique, or I'll do a tree, or I'll go after regression, or I'll try a neural net. You may try 3 or 4 of those, and you may spend 2 or 3 weeks, drifting around in the desert until you actually find something that works. And that's hard for people to understand, because they generally, non-technical people, executives and senior managers, think that data science is a technology function.
Sure.
Not. No. That's, when you put it under IT, you do it as disservice by people perceiving that it's a technology function. It's more of a strategy function than it is a technology function. That's why I suggest that it reports into the CEO or the COO. So then that's where the process gets a little bit mushy, and it's hard to say, you see it in cartoons, magic happens here, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I get it.
And then once you come out of that, then you actually turn into more of a linear process again. And it's easy to predict. The front end's easy to predict. The middle, it's a little bit more difficult. The end of it, easy to predict. Once you get that done for the first cycle, it's very predictable. You know how often you're going to refresh the models, how long the refresh takes, how to get it out of development over into production and put it into a production system. So the first time through is where all the squishiness comes in, and you just need to explain it to people and have them understand that, hey, it may be a day, it may be a month. I don't really know how long this is going to take.
Yeah. And equally, you don't know whether you've got enough data, where it is. You might need to go and source data from external sources or wherever. So I think that's one of the things. And, just as you were talking, some things came up in my mind. Listen, we talked about, building models and, the squishy bit in the middle, and a data scientist comes with that prepared, i.e. they've got the tools in their kit bag, right? But earlier in the conversation, you mentioned creativity. So what are the ideal traits? Now, I'm not going to talk about tools and technology, because they are there. We don't need it. But to be a really, really good data scientist, apart from creativity, what are the other traits that I need? And I'm thinking about people who might tomorrow say, I'm finishing my, college, university, whatever it is, I want to be a data scientist. And they're going to go off and learn R and Python because everybody does. But what are the other, well, you know what I mean? What are the other things that people need to have that will help them improve as a data scientist that are not technology or tools related?
Yeah. Curiosity and integrity. Those are the 2 things you need right there. Curiosity, because you're going to be tinkering. You're going to be trying different things out. Like you said, internal data at this point, using transactional data to figure out consumer behavior, customer behavior is pretty much done and dusted.
Pretty easy.
There's really no competitive advantage there.
Correct.
I mean, you can use all the internal data you want and combine it in different ways, but a lot of that's been done and dusted too. So you take all your internal data, you create, integrate it the best way you possibly can, and then you start bringing in external data. Many, many different perspectives. I always think of it as almost like the Death Star or a buckyball. Your problem space is this 3D environment, and you're driving intersections and rods through it. And when those rods hit, well, that's where the magic happens. That's the competitive advantage. So, curiosity is absolutely crucial. So you have to be curious. You have to think of the math, the data, the users that are going to use your data. How is all that going to come together? And integrity, because I say integrity because you are going to fail, and it takes someone with courage and integrity and forthrightness to stand up in front of a group and say, I tried this, and it was a miserable failure. And this is the reason it fell apart. And people who don't have integrity and don't have honesty really have a hard time doing that.
Yeah.
They want to shade the truth. They want to make themselves look good all the time. That's not the way the world works.
I think that's tough because I think there's a point in your book where you talk about the introverted nature of a data scientist, and I think that's the one thing that probably distorts that fact, that they will stay away from the limelight. I don't really want to talk about my failures because it's a failure. But I'm assuming that when you set up your teams, you're saying to them, look, I want you to fail.
I expect you to fail.
Yeah. I expect you to fail.
Right.
How does that message go across when, do they look at you like you're a nutcase or?
Yeah, a lot of times. Yes. That happens all the time. But it's the younger. We do hire a lot of younger people. Because we like them to be oblivious of where the guardrails are. We want them to jump. We want them to jump off mountains and cliffs all the time. But the first couple times when they fail, they will be rather shy, and it'll be hard for them to come forward and put their hand up and say, "Yeah, it just didn't work. I just wasted 2 weeks on this." And we're like, "Okay, that's great. Tell us why it didn't work." And it was either a data failure, or it was unsuited. That kind of technique didn't work, or whatever it was. But once they get over that, then we have weekly meetings every week where everybody goes around on their projects, and someone with fair regularity will raise their hand and say, "Yeah, that just didn't work." And a lot of people around the other data scientists will kind of smirk and stomp their feet and go, "Yeah, we knew it. We told you to do." But we're all the same. We got to do it ourselves. We have to learn on our own. But no one takes the piss. It's like, okay, great, you tried it and it didn't work, and why, and you learn and you move on. And we all look at each other's code, and we all talk about what we tried and what we didn't try, and what worked and what didn't work. It's a very collaborative and supportive environment.
And I think that's important specifically for those introverted types. I mean, not all data scientists are introverted. I've worked with data scientists who are very extroverted, actually, and who've got huge creativity and can sit down with a business, an SME or a business person, and absolutely drive value in that sense. But I've also seen the other side, when they're shy, they don't want to engage because it's not within their hierarchy or anything like that. And I think this is something that I often see. How do you get the creativity, the integrity piece, the technology, but how do you get those people to say, look, they may be the executive vice president of so-and-so, but so what?
It's just a person.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I continue. So I have to coach my teams, in that sense, to say, I won't say it now, but I used to work in the area of government, and so I had to present to a lot of ministers all the time. The first time I presented to a minister, I had to call up our parliamentary regulatory liaison guy, and I said, "Look, Tom, I'm dreading it right now." He said, "Listen, they all go to the toilet the same way." I know it's terrible to say that, and in that moment, I thought, "Oh, you're right. What am I worried about?" So I think it's really, I do use that when I speak to data architects or the data scientists or data engineers. This is normal life. So listen, what I want to do is I want to shift gears slightly. So very recently, the EU talked about something around the data commons or the data dividend. And, we see that post GDPR and all those kind of things, and I don't want to get onto the too of a narrative on privacy, but I understand where we're going. How far do you think that, the data dividend will be taken, and what's in it for us?
I think this is a groundbreaking move by the EU. Just as GDPR was 15 years ago or whenever it was. I've got that date.
Yeah, wrong.
Don't flood us with comments that we don't know our dates, because we don't. But I think that this move for the data dividend, the data commons, portends a massive change in how data is perceived. I just saw a story last night. Well, it was recorded, so it was past Sunday, on an American program called 60 Minutes.
Oh yeah.
Where, the Chinese are hoovering up every bit of genetics and bio data they can find about every citizen in the world,
Yeah.
and building a massive database so they can use it for whatever purposes the Chinese Communist government want to use it for. But I do believe that this is it's the pebble that's thrown into the pond, and the waves look awfully small, but that is a misrepresentation. This is going to be a tsunami over the next 5 to 10 years. The way that data is going to be treated, the monetization of it, the individual control of it. The people that sit back and go, hey, I'm fine with giving Google all my browsing data because I get Gmail for free. Well, I can guarantee you that's not a good bargain. Your data is worth a lot more than a free email system. I can guarantee
Absolutely
you.
agree.
So we are at the beginning. We are at the maybe not even the knee of the curve. The curve is just starting to go up, and the way that we treat and think about data is going to change radically in the rest of our lifetimes.
So essentially, what you're saying is that I will have control over my data, my personal data, and I will be able to effectively say to a company, here's the value exchange. I'm going to give you this, but you're going to give me that.
That's right.
And it could be a monetary value. It could be, £10,000 or $10,000 or whatever it might be.
Whatever.
And how would, that's going to rock some of those companies.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think that the EU is starting this now. They started it last February, a year ago now. This is going to roll through the governments. It's going to roll through the EU. It's going to come to Britain. It'll go to California, then sweep across America, just like everything else does. The benefit of it is that the companies like Google and Facebook and those kind of people will actually have to pay for the raw material they use, because they've been getting. I mean, how many house builders get free plywood? I don't know of any.
It's great. Yeah.
Facebook and Google have been getting free plywood forever, to build their mountains and make their executives wealthy. It's time for that value to be considered, and that value to be driven back to the people who actually deserve it. And that's you and me.
Yeah.
So, it could be that you go in and say, I don't like companies that do animal testing. Right. And you may say, I don't want them to have my data ever. Or you may say they can have my data, but they have to pay me 1,000 times more than anybody else. So that's a statement right there. So, if you could get into the data commons and look at people's settings, there's quite a commentary on people's beliefs and systems right there.
Absolutely.
So this is all going to change. It's all and it started.
And I guess that will drive, a lot of people talk about the ethical side of AI, the ethical side of how we use data. That's really going to drive that narrative now in a very different direction. As you say, probably for the better. But I wonder, the resultant effect that will have on this continuous jockeying between governments and these big organizations. These, we know them as the FANGs, the Facebooks, the Alibabas, the Amazons and Netflix and Googles and so on. So there's still tension between those two. And I think the tension will only grow to the extent, where this, as you say, will become a tsunami, or the potentially the opposite could happen.
It's possible. The governments fail in their responsibility. Most people, they're not very good at history. We forget that many of the good things that have come out of America were driven by government investment. NASA, all the things that came out of the NASA programs, that was all government funding. Much of Silicon Valley was started with government funding. There's a huge role for the US government, the British government, the EU, all governments around the world to play a role in innovation and regulation. There's been this really weird backlash in America that, government has no role, and government isn't there to help us. That's not true. government has a role to play in the innovation and the diversity, equity, and
Sure.
inclusion conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to
Mm-hmm.
drive society in a certain direction, because capitalism won't drive it in the right direction. Capitalism will drive it to where what we've seen, an accumulation of wealth by a smaller and smaller portion of the population, which is not the way societies need to work.
Of course.
So this is the beginning of a big change.
Mm-hmm.
And I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that governments will step up and they will regulate it and they will drive it, because they will see the benefit, to, income reallocation, and these organizations being made to pay the true
value
cost of their production.
Yeah. And I guess it's also incumbent on us to be a part of that, because the call out from many governments over the last couple of years has been, we're going to do our data strategy. There's been several, the EU's got the data strategy, the UK's got their data strategy, they've been going through consultations, etc. I don't know whether that's, that's going to be good enough.
And time will tell. We do need to give a shout out to Tim Berners-Lee. He was working on his project Solid for many years, and now he's turned it into, I think his new firm is called Interrupt, I think it's called Interrupt. It's spelled in a funny way, but he's one of the few people in the world who sits at a place where he knows, the way the World Wide Web grew was not the way he anticipated. But who could have?
Exactly.
He had to been a true visionary to see the way it would have gone. So he's coming back and saying, okay, this is not the way I expected it to go. These big behemoth companies dominating the landscape. I really expected this to be more of a democratization and egalitarian kind of, approach to it. And it didn't go that way, of course. So, he's working to give the power, like you said, the power to be forgotten, the power to monetize the data, the power to accrue the value of that data to the person that created it, and ultimately who really is the owner of it. So it's going to happen. It's going to be messy, and it's going to be in fits and starts. But in the next,
just as other initiatives have been,
years, it's inevitable. In the next 15 to 20 years, this is going to be a reality.
Okay, and I think that's for me probably the right way that it should go, because we are, as you've just used the term monetization, we are continuously talking to organizations about monetizing their data. And that doesn't mean selling it on. I don't feel that that's the true representation of data monetization.
Yeah, that's a narrow view.
Yeah, that is a narrow view. So I'm going to switch gears into that, actually. So what's your view on data monetization, and why corporations must think about it in a very different way that many people do about selling somebody's data across the table?
We've built multiple predictive applications that have a small portion of internal data. The majority of the data comes from external sources. And that is a form of data monetization in and of itself. Now, we bought the data from someone else, and that transaction was a monetization of the data for that vendor.
For that,
Now, we are taking the data and using it as a raw material in our modeling process. We are going to monetize that effort through either more donors, or being able to produce more therapies, or having access to more markets, or being more effective and efficient in our operations. That's data monetization as well. So the use of data, not just the buying and selling, as you said earlier, that's a very narrow view, but the use of data to do a better job in any aspect of the data, in my opinion, is an element of data monetization.
And you're right. And I think the other thing is that we have to remember, it doesn't mean that it generates profits. It could mean it's a cost-saving element.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
We're doing a project right now that who knows if it will succeed or fail, but we've looked around the market for explicit information about how this certain market operates, and it doesn't exist.
Oh, wow.
There's no financial analysts that talk about it. There's no technology analysts that collect it. There's no third-party market research companies that do it. And we have a view that we can create it. Right. We can create a proxy for measuring this market better than anybody else. And we will be the only people in the world that have that data.
Wow.
And it is a synthesis of multiple sources of data that we believe will give us an enormous competitive advantage. So that's a data monetization project.
Right there. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Can we just move into, we're getting up to the top of the hour. So I just wanted to move into AI. Look, you talked about AGI and other aspects not being around until 2250. Right now, lots of companies are talking about machine learning. Yeah, that's where it is right now. But there's this whole conversation, and last week, I think there was a paper that was released around explainable AI. How close are we to true explainable AI? And I think you mentioned it earlier in one way, where you said we're now looking at models and seeing the efficacy of those models built on top of models and so on. Yep. But I don't see the transparency there. And explainable AI is true transparency around a decision that is being taken based on a black box that spits something out. But I guess it's about the decision tree that we want to see out of that. How close are we to that now? And, is that something that is 2 years away, 10 years away, 30 years away? What's your view on that?
It's now. It's now. We have companies out there like Weights and Measures and Pattern Computer and other people that are taking, what we know as ML, which is mostly neural nets, and being able to decompose those and actually understand why those decisions are being made. So we're seeing ensembles of math being put together in ways that we can actually take those black boxes and turn them into glass boxes. We can actually see why they're making those decisions. It used to be that they were too big and too complex and too hard to understand, but that's not the case anymore, because we are approaching those completed networks with other large scale math approaches and coming out with rank lists of the effects of why they do what they do. Yeah. So we're not at a point now where the SEC, I'm talking US federal governments here, government agencies, the SEC and the FDA will accept those explainable models, but we will in the very near future. And I'm sure the UK regulators will do the same, and so will the EU regulators, because we want the power and the precision of those large networks, but we need the explainability. So we have the early stages of it now. And private companies and public companies are using that in non-regulated ways today. We will be using it in regulated industries in the future. So we have explainable AI today. Okay. And we at the leading edge of it. And we will get better and better and better over the next year to 18 months. So I would say in 24 months from now, we won't be talking about explainable AI, because it will all be explainable. We'll still be talking about ethical AI, I'm assuming. That'll be forever. As you and I started talking about, weeks ago or months ago, whenever we started talking, I started a red book about ethical AI. Yeah. And I just saw so many other books out there. I just threw up my hands and wrote, building analytics teams instead. So so you started doing that and then you wrote building that. I got you. Okay. Yeah. Ethical AI is just, it's a big one. It's a big one. Yeah. I don't think I could write a book on it. I could probably write 4 books on it, but it's just such a big area. Listen, talking about books, what do you got on the cards next? What's the? I'm going to write a book about data. That's why I'm so passionate and interested in it. Yeah. I'm going to write about the future of data. That may be the third book. The third book. I was just talking to a publisher this morning about it. They're very excited about it. We'll see if that's the one I go with or not. But the last book took me 3.5 months to write, which was an insane journey of just self-punishment. But and I hope that 3.5 months has certainly earned you quite a penny. It's done all right. It's done. Yeah. You put a lot of sweat into that. I remember you telling me you were up at 3 a.m. every morning. And I had a day job and a family and all that kind of stuff, and I'm still married, so that was good. That's quite extraordinary. I think you'll have to write a book about that. A lot of people ask me about that. But yeah, I think this book will take me maybe 6-9 months or a year to write. But yeah, I'm excited about it.
That's good. That's good. Listen, my last question to you. Where do you see the data industry going post-COVID? And what kinds of business models do you see that need to be disrupted?
Well, I've been pretty clear that I think the FANGs all need to be
Yeah.
disrupted. I'm not a huge fan of Jeff Bezos and Amazon, but they're probably the least offensive of all of them in the way that, I mean, they're pretty just straight up clear.
Yeah.
We sell you stuff and we use the data to sell you more stuff. That's about as, clear as you can get. Google and Facebook and others, I think, are more duplicitous. Google has gone quite a ways away from their do no evil where they started. So I think those business models need to be disrupted completely. Beyond disruption, as we talked about earlier, the data commons and the data, the ability for the people, the individuals to interact with their data. I think that's a whole new industry that needs to be created. Of course, those data commons and those dictionaries and the dividends will probably be government run in the beginning and probably for this first 10 or 15 years. But those then will be spun off as private businesses. Yeah. So, monopolies that are run by governments usually end up in private hands at some point. Look at NASA and SpaceX. So, I think those are the biggest changes that we'll see.
That's great. Well, look, John Thompson, thank you so much for appearing on the show today. I've had such a great chat. I think we could have talked a huge amount more, but thank you so much. And listen, where can people contact you? Where's your book? Where are they all available?
The books are on Amazon, so just go search for Analytics: How to Win with Intelligence or Building Analytics Teams. They're both out there, easy to get. And then connect with me on LinkedIn, John Thompson. I'm easy to find.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you. Great conversation.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Have a great day.